The hangar of the Joint Galactic Fleet was filled with noise and tension. Ships from different species rested side by side, their crews rushing to prepare for the coming battle. The air smelled of burning fuel and hot metal. Soldiers shouted. Engineers moved crates of weapons, and commanders barked orders. Everyone knew what waited beyond the stars. The enemy armada was coming, and this battle would decide if they lived or vanished. Yet among the noise and flashing lights, almost no one noticed when a human transport pod slid quietly into the hangar. The small craft did not match the sleek design of alien warships. It was plain, old, almost unimpressive. The hatch opened, and from it stepped a single human woman. She carried no armor, no heavy rifle, not even a helmet. She looked out of place, fragile compared to the towering insectoid warriors and armored reptilian soldiers. But she walked with calm steps, holding a small black case in her hand. Many heads turned and whispers began. What was a human woman doing here at the heart of the fleet? The aliens had heard of humans before, but most only knew rumors. Some said humans were unpredictable and reckless. Others laughed that they were weak creatures from a death world, who survived only by luck. This woman seemed to prove the second belief true. She looked too ordinary, too unthreatening, almost like a civilian who had walked into the wrong place. A group of armored officers, their scales shining under the hangar lights, stared at her and then at each other.
One of them laughed loudly, his voice echoing.
Is this the help Earth sends a single woman with a toy case? Another officer smirked, saying she would not even last 5 minutes in space combat. Their voices were full of mockery, and nearby soldiers chuckled nervously, yet the human woman did not react. She kept walking, her eyes scanning the hangar as if she was not listening at all. When she reached the command platform, the highest-ranking admiral of the Joint Fleet finally stepped forward. He was an old warrior from the scaled Rither species, tall and heavy, with battle scars across his armor. His voice was sharp as he addressed her. State your name and purpose. This is no place for tourists. The woman stopped and looked up at him. Her face was calm, unreadable, her tone steady. My name does not matter. Earth sent me. You may call me. What you want, what matters is why I am here. The admiral narrowed his glowing eyes. And why are you here? She placed the black case gently on the command table. The sound echoed louder than expected, cutting through the chatter of the hangar. She looked around, meeting the eyes of every commander, every officer, every doubtful soldier who had paused to watch. Earth sent me as your wild card. The word hung in the air like a shadow. Wild card, the officers frowned. Some shook their heads, some laughed again, thinking it a bad joke, but the woman did not smile. She pressed her hand to the case, and it opened with a soft hiss. At once the laughter died. Inside the case was no weapon anyone recognized. Instead, a strange device hummed with a pulse of blue light projecting thin streams into the air. Symbols, maps, coded lines appeared above the table, alive and shifting. The device was alien, and yet not alien, built with precision none of them had seen. It reached into their command systems and linked instantly, without permission. The fleet's tactical map updated in real time, revealing enemy movements that even their scouts had not yet reported. Gasps filled the air. The admiral's eyes widened as the hologram displayed the enemy fleet's exact position, formation, and timing of arrival. Impossible, one officer muttered. No one has this data.
No one.
The woman looked at them without blinking. Earth does. No, so do you. The hangar had grown silent, all earlier mockery forgotten. Every soldier felt it in their bones. This human was not here by mistake. The alien officers exchanged uneasy glances, unsure what they were dealing with. Creature who looked fragile. Almost harmless, but who carried knowledge that no one else had. The admiral leaned closer, his heavy voice lowering. If what you show us is true, you may have just saved us before the battle even began.
Oh.
But why would Earth risk sending only one person? The woman finally allowed the faintest trace of a smile. Because one person is enough. She closed the case again, shutting off the light, and the hangar seemed darker without it. Soldiers shifted uneasily, their earlier laughter replaced with something else, respect mixed with fear. She turned and began walking toward the command chamber, leaving silence in her path. Everyone moved aside to let her through. For the first time, the fleet felt something new, hope, and also a question none dared to speak aloud. Who exactly was this woman, and what else was hidden inside that case she carried so calmly? The enemy fleet was already on its way, stronger, larger, and ready to crush them. But now, for reasons none of them understood, they believed they might still stand a chance. It was because of Hertha, unknown human who had just arrived. The command chamber was heavy with tension. Dozens of alien commanders stood around the central table, their eyes locked on the glowing map that showed the enemy armada closing in. Each passing moment brought the hostile fleet closer. Their formation was massive, stretching across the stars like a wall of fire. The alien officers whispered in their own languages. Though the human woman did not understand their words, she could feel the fear pressing into the room like a storm about to break. The admiral slammed his clawed hand against the table. To silence the whispers, his scales reflected the flickering lights of the hologram. "They outnumber us 20 to 1, he growled. "Our ships are fewer, our weapons weaker. You're standing against the impossible," no one argued. Everyone knew it was true. The numbers painted their doom clearly on the map, yet all eyes turned slowly toward the small human woman who stood quietly near the table. She had not moved since placing her strange case down. She studied the glowing symbols with calm eyes, her expression unreadable, as if she was staring at a puzzle, not a death sentence. One of the younger officers, a proud insectoid warrior with sharp mandibles, pointed a claw at her. "This is why humans are dangerous to trust. Look at her face. No fear, no respect. She doesn't even understand what is coming." Drew murmurs of agreement. Several others nodded, their antennae twitching in anger. To them, her silence looked like arrogance. The admiral's glowing eyes fixed on the woman. "Do you understand the scale of what we face, human?" he asked slowly. "Do you understand what 20 enemy fleets mean?" She finally turned to meet his gaze. Her voice was calm, even soft, but every word struck the air like steel. "I understand. Fear tells you this battle is already lost, but fear lies. Fear keeps you alive in small fights. But in a war like this, fear only kills you faster." Answers stirred the chamber. Some scoffed, others grew uneasy. The insectoid officer hissed with rage. "Then you admit you are fool. We should abandon this fight and retreat before we are crushed." Another officer, a reptilian with heavy armor across his chest, slammed his fist against the table. "Retreat is dishonor. We will fight even if it means death." The room broke into arguments, voices clashing like blades. Some wanted to retreat, others demanded they stand and die with honor. No one could agree. Through the chaos, the human woman simply watched, her hand resting lightly on the black case. She waited until the voices reached their loudest, then spoke again. "You are all wrong." The words cut through the noise, silencing the chamber. Every eye turned to her again, though some glared with hate. She stepped closer to the map, her calm voice steady. "If you retreat, you die hunted like prey. You fight without thought, you die crushed by their numbers. But if you listen, just listen, there's a way to live, a way to win." Her confidence was unsettling. The commanders exchanged doubtful glances. How could this fragile human talk of winning when even their best minds had failed to see hope? She pressed her hand against the map, and her device awakened again. Blue light spread across the table, reshaping the symbols. Lines of enemy movement shifted, paths overlapped, timing adjusted. She showed them not just numbers, but patterns, weak points hidden deep inside the enemy formation, places no alien mind had noticed. "They are not perfect," she said softly. "No one is. They believe you are too broken to resist, so they march with arrogance. But arrogance leaves cracks. Cracks that only need the right hands to break wide open." The admiral leaned closer, his breath slow and heavy. His scarred face betrayed something, unusual hope, but also suspicion. "And you believe you are the one with those hands?" Her answer was simple. "Yes." The room fell into another silence, but this time it was not filled with laughter or insults. It was filled with unease. They wanted to reject her words, but what she showed them on the map made sense. For the first time, they saw possible paths to survival. The insectoid officer hissed again, though weaker now. You speak like you are certain of victory. Are humans blind to reality? The woman turned her calm gaze on him. No, humans just refuse to stop fighting until the last breath. That is what you never understood. The insectoid froze, his mandibles clicking nervously. The admiral raised his head slowly. His heavy voice filled the chamber once more. The enemy fleet will arrive within 3 cycles. If we follow her, we gamble everything on her vision. If she is wrong, we are all dead. No one answered him. Every commander felt the weight of the choice. Finally, the admiral looked directly at the human. His voice lowered to almost a whisper. Tell me, human, if death is so close, why are you not afraid for the first time? She allowed herself a thin, cold smile. Because fear belongs to tomorrow. And tomorrow does not matter if we don't. Fight today. The silence that followed was heavier than any noise. Outside the window of the command chamber, the stars were shifting. Tiny red marks appeared across the horizon, growing brighter with each passing second. The enemy was coming. Every ship, every life, every world depended on what they chose now. And in the center of it all stood the human woman, calm and steady, as if she had already seen how this battle would unfold. The alarm rang across the fleet as the first enemy ships appeared on the horizon of stars. Red signals filled the tactical map, their numbers stretching farther than the eye could follow. The silence inside the command chamber broke into hurried voices, orders shouted across comms, and the low rumble of engines powering weapons. Outside, the black emptiness of space turned alive with lights. The enemy fleet moved like a wall of fire, advancing without hesitation, their weapons all ready. Glowing, the smaller Allied fleet braced itself. They had heard the woman's plan, but belief was different from trust. Fear still ran deep in every soldier's heart. The admiral stood at the center, his scarred claws gripping the table, shields at maximum, prepare for impact. His voice was steady, but even he could not hide the heaviness in his eyes. Then the first shot came. It tore through the dark, a beam so bright it lit the entire sky for seconds. One Allied ship vanished instantly, its hull breaking apart in silence before flames spread through space. The blast shook the fleet, not through sound but through the terror that followed. The second shot struck moments later, cutting 3 ships into broken metal. The enemy had opened fire, and with each strike, the sky itself seemed to burn. Screams filled the comms. Commanders shouted for evasive maneuvers, but panic spread faster than discipline. Ships scattered, breaking formation. The enemy pressed forward, their fire raining like a storm. Too many? It felt like the end. And that was when the human woman moved. She had stood silently, watching, while the fleet crumbled in fear. Now she stepped forward and slid her case into the command table system. The device connected instantly, its blue light spilling across the map. Data rushed in, overwhelming the alien officers. Symbols shifted. Enemy paths revealed themselves in thin, glowing lines. What had been chaos was suddenly shown as a pattern. She spoke, her voice calm but cutting through the panic like a blade. Squadron 3, dive left. Shield ships close gaps at Sector 9. Hold fire until my mark. The alien commanders looked at her in disbelief. Some hesitated, unsure if they should follow. The admiral's eyes flashed. Do it. Orders flew across comms. Ships moved in new paths, weaving between fire, where before they had been random. And broken, now they moved as one body. The enemy fire still came heavy, but the fleet was no longer simply surviving. They were adapting. Within minutes, the woman's voice guided them through the storm. She called out warnings before the enemy even fired, predicting strikes seconds in advance. Entire squadrons lived because of her words. On the front lines, soldiers stared in shock as their ships narrowly dodged what should have been death. How does she know? One captain whispered as his vessel avoided a beam by mere meters. On the command deck, the insectoid officer glared, his mandibles twitching. This is not natural. No one sees war like this. Yet even he could not deny the results. Ships that would have been lost were alive, turning their weapons back on the enemy. The woman's eyes never left the shifting patterns of the map. To her, The battlefield was not chaos. It was a puzzle, and she was solving it in real time. "Now," she said, her voice sharp. The Allied fleet unleashed its first coordinated strike, beams tearing across the void. Explosions lit up the horizon as enemy ships fell, their formations breaking slightly under the surprise. Cheers erupted across comms, but she did not celebrate. Her voice cut through again. "Stay tight. They will counter in 10 seconds. Shield units, brace." And just as she warned, a massive enemy volley struck exactly where she had predicted. But this time the fleet was ready. Shields flared, damage taken but far less than before. Looked at her with something new in their eyes, not just disbelief, but respect. She was saving them in ways no alien tactician could have imagined. Yet even as she guided them, the cost was heavy. Ships still burned, screams still filled the comms. The enemy's numbers were crushing, and every moment was a struggle for survival. But something was changing. Panic had turned into discipline. Despair was shifting into defiance. The Admiral finally spoke, his voice rising above the noise. "Stay on her course. Follow the human." His words traveled across the fleet like fire. For the first time, the Allied fleet moved not with fear, but with purpose. The enemy pressed harder, their fire turning more desperate, but the fleet survived each strike with uncanny precision.
Out.
And with every moment, the legend of the human woman grew. On enemy channels, confusion spread. "How do they know where we will strike? Why are they not breaking?" Fear began to creep into the voices of those who had come as conquerors. In the command chamber, the insectoid officer whispered, his voice tight, "She is not fighting them. She is reading them." The Admiral turned to the woman. Her calm face was lit by the glow of her device, her eyes unblinking as if she saw the entire battle unfold before it happened. She spoke again, her voice quiet but steady. "This is only the beginning. Hold the line. We haven't broken them yet." And outside, the sky caught fire once more. Ships burned, metal split, the void itself seemed alive with destruction. Yet the fleet endured, guided by the hands of a human who should have been powerless, but instead became the one voice holding them all together. The battle dragged on, and the stars were no longer black.
Ow.
They burned red and white with endless flashes of fire. Every second, ships exploded into bright clouds of debris, and every second, her voice kept guiding those who remained. Woman stood like a shadow against the glow of her strange device. Her face was calm, almost cold, while everyone around her sweated, shouted, and panicked. To her, it was not chaos, it was a pattern. The enemy fired again and again, but her voice came first. "Squadron 6, break now. Unit 9, dive low. Shields, shift to the left." Her warnings came seconds before the shots, as if she could see through time. Entire squadrons survived because of her words. Officers who had doubted her now repeated her orders without hesitation. Soldiers whispered across comms, "She knows. She knows before it happens." At first they thought it was luck, then chance, but the more she spoke, the more impossible it became to deny. She was reading the battle like no one else could. The Admiral stood close, his scarred claws gripping the edge of the table as he watched her work. He had commanded wars for decades, fought battles across the galaxy, but never had he seen anyone like her. The enemy fleet was larger, stronger, but they were bleeding under her guidance. Ow! She leaned over the map, her eyes scanning the moving symbols. She pointed to a section where enemy ships seemed to be shifting erratically. She said sharply, "An ambush in 30 seconds. Pull your forward units back, or they will be erased." The officer stared. Nothing on the map suggested an ambush. To them, it looked like normal movement, but the Admiral did not hesitate. "Do as she says." Orders flew, ships pulled back, and seconds later, the enemy revealed hidden strike vessels. They unleashed a volley that should have torn through the front lines, but instead their fire hit nothing but empty space. The fleet lived again, the chamber filled with shocked silence. Commanders stared at her, their disbelief slowly changing into something heavier. She had not guessed, she had known. The insectoid officer finally broke the silence, his mandibles clicking nervously. No alien mind could have read that. How did you see it? She looked at him calmly, her tone steady. Because you were looking at the fire. I was looking at the shadows it cast. Did not understand, but her words chilled him all the same. Outside, the battle raged. The enemy began to push harder, frustrated by their failures. Explosions tore through the fleet, but again her voice cut through the chaos. They're shifting to the right intercept. Do not chase their rear. It's a trap. Again, she was right. The fleet survived strikes that should have broken them. The commanders followed her every word, and for the first time, the enemy began to stumble. An enemy comes. Panic was rising. They're moving before we fire. They know where we strike before we strike. This is impossible. Fear was spreading to those who had once marched with certainty. In the command chamber, officers whispered to each other. Some said she was more than human. Others wondered if she was part machine, her brain enhanced beyond nature. But she gave no explanation. She only continued, her eyes locked on the flowing patterns. To her, the battle was not a storm. It was a puzzle with pieces falling into place. One commander, trembling with exhaustion, turned to her and whispered, "How long can you keep this up?" She answered, without looking away. "As long as it takes." Then her hand hovered over the map again. "The enemy will split their fleet. They will send a hammer unit straight at our heart while the others circle. If you scatter, you die. If you hold, you live." The admiral's eyes widened. "Then we hold." The officers looked uneasy, but they obeyed. Seconds later, just as she said, the enemy fleet split, the hammer unit rushing in to crush the core. But the fleet was ready. Shields held, weapons fired in perfect timing, and the enemy broke upon them like waves against stone. The chamber filled with cheers, but the woman did not celebrate. She stood still, her expression unreadable. She had saved them again, but she knew it was not over. Enemies still outnumbered them, and their strength was far from spent. The admiral leaned close, his voice low. "I have fought my whole life, but I've never seen anyone like you." "What are you?" She finally looked at him, her calm eyes reflecting the blue light of her device. "I am human. That is enough." Her words carried through the chamber like thunder. The officers stared at her, some with awe, some with fear. They realized she was not simply guiding them, she was changing them. They no longer fought as a broken alliance of frightened species. They fought as one fleet, unified by the voice of a single human who saw what others could not. Outside, the stars burned brighter as the war raged on. But now, for the first time since the battle began, the fleet felt something powerful. Not just survival, not just resistance. They felt the faint, terrifying possibility of victory. It was because of her, the woman, who saw what others couldn't. The battle had stretched into endless hours. Space was littered with broken ships, drifting metal, and bodies frozen in silence. The Allied fleet was battered, shields cracked, weapons running hot, but they were still alive. They lived only because of her voice. The human woman stood at the command table, her strange device still glowing with lines of light. Her eyes were sharp, her breathing steady, but the strain around her showed. Every prediction, every command was tearing at her strength. Yet she did not stop. She could not. Then the alarm screamed louder than ever before. The tactical map lit up with a single massive red symbol. The enemy had revealed their greatest weapon. It was a super weapon ship, a giant unlike anything the fleet had ever seen. Shadow stretched across the stars, covered in cannons and layered with armor that seemed impossible to break. Smaller ships formed a wall around it, protecting it as it advanced. The officers froze. Fear returned like a wave. Even the admiral's scarred claws trembled slightly as he stared at the glowing. "Mark, that is their hammer," he muttered. "One shot from that, and our fleet is gone." Voices rose in panic. "It cannot be stopped. We have no weapons strong enough. We must retreat." But retreat was no longer possible. Enemy super weapon locked on, and energy began to glow at its core. The light was so bright, it cast shadows across the command chamber. Many believed it was already over, yet the woman only watched, her expression calm but focused. She studied the ship as if she had been waiting for this moment. Then she spoke. "It can be destroyed." The chamber fell silent. Every officer turned to her in disbelief. The insectoid officer hissed sharply. "You lie. That thing is death itself." The woman looked at him without blinking. "Nothing is perfect. Even monsters bleed." She tapped her device, and the map shifted again. She highlighted a section of the massive ship, a cluster of points hidden deep within its defenses. "This is its weakness. But to reach it, you must do what none of you will dare." The Admiral's voice was heavy. "What do you mean?" She raised her eyes to him. "You must fly straight into its heart." Gasps spread through the chamber. The plan sounded like madness. To charge at a weapon designed to erase entire fleets was suicide. Commanders shouted in protest. "Impossible. We will be vaporized before we reach it. This is insanity." Yet the woman stood firm, her voice sharp. "If you scatter, you all die. If you retreat, you all die. If you charge, you may live. There is no other path." The Admiral studied her face, searching for doubt, but found none.
Ow.
She truly believed in her plan. He closed his eyes for a long moment, then opened them with fire. "Then we charge." His words spread through the coms. At first there was silence, disbelief, then voices rose in answer. Soldiers who had once mocked her now gritted their teeth and prepared to follow. Engines roared across the fleet as ships turned to face the giant. The enemy weapon continued to glow brighter, preparing to unleash its killing strike. The woman spoke calmly into the coms, her voice reaching every corner of the fleet. "Do not fear the fire. Trust the timing. Follow my voice, and you will live." The countdown began. The super weapon fired. A beam of pure destruction tore through the void, wide enough to swallow dozens of ships. But the fleet moved exactly when she commanded. "Now, dive." They slipped under the blast, the light burning just above them. Ships shook, shields cracked, but they survived. Soldiers gasped in disbelief. No one had ever dodged such a strike. Again, her voice cut through. "Break right. Climb now." She guided them through each volley, weaving between death with impossible precision. Enemy escorts swarmed, firing wildly, but the fleet pressed on. For every ship lost, 2 more broke through the wall. The giant weapon loomed larger and larger, its glowing core pulsing like a star about to explode. Finally, they reached the edge of its defenses. "Now," she whispered. "Strike now." The fleet unleashed everything they had. Beams, missiles, plasma fireall poured into the weak point she had shown. At first, nothing happened. The enemy laughed across open coms, mocking their desperate attack. But then the cracks appeared, small at first, then spreading like fire. Across dry leaves, the super weapon trembled. Its core flickered, unstable. The woman's voice rose one last time, sharp as steel. "Push. Do not stop. Break it." The Allied fleet obeyed with everything left in them. The weak point burst open, and the giant began to collapse under its own power. The glow of its core grew unstable, then blinding. A final explosion erupted, tearing the super weapon apart in a storm of fire that lit the entire battlefield. Silence followed where death had once loomed. Now there was only drifting wreckage. The impossible had been done. Cheers filled the coms, voices shouting in disbelief and joy. The insectoid officer fell to his knees, his mandibles trembling. The Admiral looked at the woman, his scarred face filled with awe. "You just saved us all." She shook her head. "Not yet. The fleet still fights. But now they know death can bleed." Her calm words carried through the chamber. Outside, the enemy armada staggered in chaos, shaken by the loss of their greatest weapon. For the first time, they looked unsure. And for the first time, the Allied fleet looked ready to win. The galaxy was quiet after the battle, but quiet in a way. It felt strange, like the silence after a storm when the air still carried the weight of destruction. Fleets had been broken, worlds scarred, and millions of lives lost, but there was also a strange sense of relief, as if something impossible had been prevented the humans had done. What no one expected, and at the center of it all, was the unknown woman, the one they now called the wild card her. Name still was not known to many, some whispered. Guesses, some invented legends, others claimed she was a ghost of Earth, a spirit sent to protect humanity, but those who had fought beside her knew she was real flesh and blood. They remembered her standing in the middle of chaos, giving orders without hesitation, her voice cutting through fear like a blade, her hands steady, even as entire fleets trembled. The alien commanders who survived the fight found themselves shaken. They had believed humanity was reckless, fragile, and divided, yet what they had seen with their own eyes defied every report humans fought. Like no other species, they adapted, they broke rules, and they turned weakness into strength. But most of all, they followed her. She was one person, yet she carried a force greater than fleets. She had become a symbol the Galaxy Council called an emergency session. They wanted answers. Who was she? Where did she come from? How could one human break the chains of war so completely? Many feared her. Some wanted her captured, others wanted her destroyed before she could rise again, but humans refused. They stood united in a way that made other species uneasy. And the fleet's survivors told stories. One pilot swore that during the final push he saw her ship burning, but still moving forward. Another said she boarded enemy vessels alone, cutting through their defense, like she knew every move before it happened. Some said her eyes seemed to glow as if she was seeing the future, as if she was already steps ahead. The stories grew, and with them the fear and respect, but while legends spread she disappeared after the battle. No one saw her leave, no one found her body. Some believed she had been lost among the wreckage, others believed she had chosen to vanish because she never wanted fame or recognition. She had come to save them, and when it was done she walked away like a shadow. Alien empires changed after that. They still held their fleets, still showed their strength, but they no longer looked at humans. Ships entered a sector. The aliens hesitated when humans spoke in council chambers. They listened more carefully, and when soldiers faced humans on the field, they remembered the stories of the wild card for humans. Her memory became something more than a person. She became a lesson. Leaders trained new recruits by telling them her tactics. Scholars studied the strange ways she thought and planned, but the ordinary people remembered her in a different way. They remembered that in the darkest moment, when hope was nearly gone, one human had stood up and changed everything, and that memory gave them courage. Years passed, but her name was still whispered by enemies and allies alike. Some called her the protector of the fleet, some called her the storm that never died, some called her the wild card, the one piece no enemy could control. Then one night, far from the centers of power, in a quiet station on the edge of known space, a small ship docked. No one paid attention to the traveler who stepped out. She was older now, her face lined by time, her hair touched with gray, but her eyes still sharp as stars. She walked past the crowds unnoticed, a simple figure in a galaxy that had made her into a myth. She smiled to herself as she looked at the stars through the wide glass of the station window. She did not need recognition. She did not need statues or songs. She had done what she came to do. She had saved them when no one else could, and she had proven something the galaxy would never forget, that humans were not to be underestimated, that sometimes one person could change the path of millions. Somewhere beyond those stars, wars still burned, new enemies rose, and old empires clashed, but somewhere deep in the hearts of every soldier, human or alien, was a memory of her, a reminder that battles were not won only by numbers or power. Sometimes they were won by a wild card, and that truth made the galaxy afraid, but also gave it hope. So her legacy lived on, unseen but unbroken. A whisper across the stars that even when all seemed lost, one human, one unknown woman could stand against the impossible and win.